A storm's finest disguise is a preceding bright day. That was the lesson that the souls on the armory world of Brotel 4 would be painfully taught in their moments of jubilation. Just as the rotation that would complete the world's solar cycle concluded, the streets of the various hive cities rang with cheers, bells, and war hymns as its population welcomed in several formations of Imperial Guard upon their surface after having completed campaigns of great valor and service to the Emperor, and were about to send out several others into their own path to service and glory. The air carried on it the scent of flowers, pumped out from the hive's ventilation systems at the governor's order. But the scene of celebration would not last, as the sky would darken with clouds, which in turn unleashed a downpour. The sudden atmospheric change was caused by the massive bodies of two space hulks that had been spat out of the warp. To the added shock and horror of the transport fleets and their escorts hanging above the planet, whatever malignant forces dwelled within both behemoths were able to bring life to their tools of death, with the engines of multiple vessels in the backsides of the space hulks blazing like the system's sun and pushing them forward. The bestial amalgamations unleashed seemingly oceans worth of ordnance around themselves. While they tore chunks out of each other's hulls, that did not seem to bother them at all, as the Void Garrison was being mercilessly shredded and forced to disperse, giving the pair a clear path towards the planet. Today was the day young Richard had worked towards for the past few years. He had proven himself ready to ascend from a cadet into a private of Brotel's planetary defense force. The successful cadets from his class were in the middle of their graduation ceremony when the harrowing call of sirens deafened the air across the planet. All celebrations ceased, and everyone made for cover. Now officially inducted into the PDF, Richard and his squad rushed towards their barracks in order to change their ceremonial attire for one more fitting for combat. It was on their way that they could see the dark clouds begin to part, revealing the monstrous vessels that had forced themselves into their home's orbit and were now racing towards its surface. With every passing moment, their shapes grew larger and larger, enveloped in flame.
"Grab your gear and head towards the bunker, lightweights,"
Richard's squad leader shouted as soon as they entered the barracks. The command itself was simple, a drill everyone had practiced many times over, though Richard proved to be the speediest among his mates this time. With his gear equipped, he moved down the ladder to the bunker below. His focus was most admirable and was likely what saved his life, as it prevented him from looking outside of the barracks window and seeing the fully revealed immensity of the space hulks smash into the ground. An uneasy silence had gripped the barracks for a few moments, before it shattered by a violent shake and a sonic boom. Seemingly at the flip of a switch, the organized squads broke into their individual components, screaming in terror as they rushed towards the narrow bunker hole.
What's going on?
Richard barely managed to call out as the man he had looked up to shoved his upper torso into the bunker hole and stretched out his arm in an attempt to grab the former cadet and yelled,
"Bobson, pull me in right now, Bobson!"
Rather than speeding up, the private was initially taken aback by the manic display before him, but he got a hold of himself and nodded in affirmation, stretching out his own hand as instructed. In a few heartbeats, their hands clasped together, and in the very next, a deafening wave smashed into their position, ripping the barracks building from the ground and tossing away its shattered corpse off into the distance. The initial impact made Richard close his eyes and turn his head away to protect it, but a sudden lightness to his grip prompted him to look back up, upon which he would see his squad leader gone, save for his forearm torn at the elbow, which was oddly still clinging to the private's own hand. Shaken from the sight, the young man yelled out in terror and attempted to both throw and push the appendage away from himself, due to which, however, he let go of the ladder and lost his footing, falling down on the concrete. A single thud was what he remembered before the world vanished into darkness. After Emperor knows how long, while still lost in this state, Richard would begin to find his way back into the waking world, the stillness of his mind being banished by the sound of something scraping against permacrete. Slowly, he would force his eyes open, and to his surprise, he was not met by the dark exterior of the bunker. Instead, he could see what he barely recognized as one of the side streets to the barracks, as it appeared completely demolished and littered with rubble. What transformed his surprise into concern, however, was how the street was becoming more distant as he realized he was being dragged away. Looking down, he saw that his hands and legs were bound in rope as he was laid on top of a makeshift stretcher surrounded by various bags of equipment that used to be stored in the barracks. Being the next logical thing to do, Richard slowly looked up, making sure to be as unnoticeable as possible, not knowing whether he was in the presence of a savior or a predator. By the Emperor's merciful grace, the Brotelian could release a sigh of relief after seeing that the one dragging him was a man, clad in the uniform and flak armor of the Cadian shock troops. Said sigh was apparently audible enough for the guardsman to notice as he stopped in his tracks and looked back at him.
So, finally awake, huh? Can you walk on your own?
His voice was oddly calm. Contrary to Richard's jumpy state, the Cadian did not look panicked in the slightest. In fact, his face bore the dour expression of exhaustion.
Yes, I believe I can.
Good.
Suddenly, the guardsman dropped the stretcher, its passenger letting out a yelp as he hit the ground. Wordlessly, the Cadian stretched his back with a groan before turning around and untying the young man's bindings.
Pick that up and follow me. The sector's clear for now, but you never know when the little vermin are skittering around when it's quiet.
An exceedingly simple, yet cryptic instruction.
You're referring to the things that fell from the sky? Has the enemy been identified?
Orcs.
The word left the man like a painful sigh, further enhancing his tired demeanor.
Why can't I ever be Tau that decided to jump to the opposite side of the galaxy? For God Emperor's sake, all the bastards on the eastern fringe of Ultima have it easy. If you ask me, it's us poor sods in North Solar that have it to deal with the worst shit. At least the traders are simple lunatics, filthy knife eaters, just run away anytime you see them. But orcs, they're just idiocy made functional. And that is a pain no sane mind should interact with.
The display, while normative, did not have the effect that Richard thought it would. He had always imagined the guardsmen from beyond the stars to be amongst the most hardened followers of the Emperor, that stood firm in the face of everything the galaxy could throw at them. Yet, this one appeared more like a man going through a midlife crisis.
Complaining like that is not very godlike of you.
The moment the words left his mouth, the private remembered his standing as a PDF soldier in comparison to an Imperial guardsman from a renowned regiment such as the shock troops, so he hurried to add,
With all due respect, sir.
Richard preemptively flinched his face in preparation to be chewed out or physically disciplined, but nothing of the sort came. Instead, the Canian only rubbed his eyes and said in a flat tone,
You're not my commissar, kid, so get off my back. By the thrones, mercy, we're all human, but we all don't get a 3-day nap break. The rest of us only get to vent on occasion.
3 days?
Richard could not believe his ears.
If the Greenskins have not yet been repelled, why has this area not been occupied and fortified? This was supposed to be a military concentration point.
2 reasons, mainly. First being after the 2 space hulks crashed into Brotal, everything in a 500-kilometer radius was leveled, this place included. While the second is that with practically every command structure on the planet is dismantled, and without receiving orbital support, the filthy Xenos have been able to overrun any positions that have attempted to regroup. My squad and I were tunneling out of a bunker on the second day, when the foul beasts fell upon us, with a pack of their mouth monsters. I was the only one to make it out on the other side, and I haven't been able to establish contact with any pocket of resistance since. But I am more concerned by the lack of action in orbit. And when they translated into the system, it was only the hulks that registered on our auger reports. And I know that my regiment was supposed to be picked up by a convoy that should have arrived yesterday. Yet there's not even been a whisper coming from beyond the clouds.
Such a revelation boded of great ill. It left the young private with a single and fairly obvious question.
What do you think happened in orbit?
Probably more orcs.
The Cadian paused for a few tense seconds before adding.
And as weird as it may sound for me to say, I pray to the Emperor there's just more orcs.
Purely for his own sake, Richard decided not to dwell further on the topic. With his need to know the status of his surroundings at least temporarily satisfied, he decided to change the subject by initiating the now overdue introductions, taking off his helmet and revealing his short blonde hair.
Private Richard Bobson, of the 224th Bottle Garrison Battalion. If you want me to, I can salute you, if you permit me to set down the cargo.
The firmness of his tone gave the Cadian momentary pause as he stopped and turned around, studying the young man before him behind the cover of his helmet's visor. He had written him off as a skittish newbie that couldn't be useful for anything more than manual labor, but in the red of his eyes he could see a spark of dedicated determination, which he clearly recognized as that of an equal. Not that he would tell him that. But, as a token gesture, he took off his own helmet, revealing his own violet eyes, ebony hair, and standing so that the markings of a pair of open pliers with 3 stars above them and the number 931 beneath them could be prominently seen on his shoulder pad.
Sergeant Lorenz Dusk, of the 931st Cadian Shock Troop Engineering Regiment. Saluting is not necessary, just get a move on. I'd rather be at the shelter before it gets dark, so we can cover our tracks.
Following that statement, Lawrence put his helmet back on and resumed his march. Richard followed his example and redoubled his efforts to catch up. Now that an air of familiarity was established, Richard decided to try satisfying a personal curiosity that had been bugging him for the last couple of minutes.
So, Sergeant Dusk, if I may, why did you have me tied up?
Tied you up? Kid, you're lucky I didn't bash your skull in with a brick thinking you were some cannibal when I found you. Some poor sod's torn off arm was next to you. That was until I found the rest of the pieces of the poor sod in question, under the rubble of the bunker above you.
Remembering the face of his squad leader in his final moments caused Richard's face to fall in gloom. Noticing this, his senior slowed down until the two were shoulder to shoulder, at which point he delivered a slap on the back of the junior's head, bringing him back to the present reality.
Was he your first?
I'm sorry, what?
The first comrade you've seen mulched by circumstances you could not prevent.
Oh, well, yes. The day of the fall was my formation's graduation day as official privates for the PDF. He was my squad leader. My mentor.
As Richard's words trailed off, each being more faint than the last, Lawrence shook his head and this time patted his back in a reassuring gesture.
You get used to it. As sad as it may sound, you should be prepared for everyone you ever know to die. The best you can hope for is that they do so in the service of the Emperor.
While not what he really wanted to hear, the Brotelian began to feel a small semblance of peace begin to come to him, but he could not fully expel his feelings, which hung like a weight on his chest. Seemingly reading him like an open book, the Cadian sighed once more and added,
Look, it's also likely that you can't get over it. Such is a man's nature. Death is a harsh thing that one simply can't overlook, without at least being slightly broken inside. But that is what we all are, and it is our duty to the Emperor and the Imperium that fixes us and gives us purpose. So just remember this. The dead do not need your sympathy or grief. They are at his side now. As of this moment, your only concern should be how to make yourself a better, and preferably longer, story of which you can tell when you meet them again.
Having said what was on his mind, the Cadian once again strode forth, keeping a good few paces ahead of the Brotelian. Despite the weight in his chest not lessening, Richard felt as though he could push through the drag a bit better than before. With a soft smile on his features, he uttered a single.
Thank you.
No response was given, but the private did not need it, as he suspected that Lawrence's expression was one mirroring his own, and he was fine thinking it was, without confirming it.